Welcome to Evening Rounds, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes in medicine. During this podcast, Kelsey and I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Sharon Lum. Dr. Lum is our new chair of surgery here at Loma Linda University Health. During this podcast, Dr. Lum talks about how her hippie Chinese American parents had them find value in the oddities of life, and how this actually influenced her career decision to this day, and how she actually practices medicine. She's a recognized breast cancer surgeon, but I came away inspired by not just her surgical skills, but actually how she communicates with her patients during very difficult conversations about cancer. If you like what you hear on our podcast, please subscribe. Sharon, it's great to have you on our podcast this evening.
It's great to be here.
We have lots of things we want to chat with you about. I hope that this podcast will be so successful that we are invited to Sundance Film Festival next year.
Well, have to compete with my sister. Keep up with her. Yeah.
So tell me more about that. Yeah. So you have a sister who is a documentarian, or?
Yeah. I love to brag about my little sister, Debbie Lum. She's an independent documentary filmmaker, and it's been really exciting to watch her career grow and blossom over all of these years that she's been slogging away at it, also trying to raise her family and do all these other things. But this year was really exciting because her film was accepted at Sundance. Wow. And premiered there just this last month ago.
That's incredible. It sounds like you come from a very talented family. I can't imagine what that was like growing up in a house where you've got probably your sister who's very, very into the arts, and then you who are incredibly talented and probably very into science as a young child. Tell me a little bit about what that was like growing up in that family.
So, it's a funny thing how we got to where we are. And, just talking about my sister for a moment, I'll digress a little bit, or maybe we'll come back to it. But her film at Sundance is called Try Harder. Her career is focused on the Asian American experience, but this film in particular focused on a very elite public school in the San Francisco area, and essentially how hard the kids worked to get the shot at going to their dream college, and how important it was to the students and their families, but really try to humanize that experience so the kids don't look like machines just trying to take as many AP classes as possible. And it's really interesting when I look at that and kind of reflect on how I grew up with my two sisters. My experience there, though, was really shaped by, my mom and my dad, who were actually, they're both Chinese Americans, but total hippies. And so
that's awesome.
It wasn't the traditional, I think, Asian American experience, but we did end up going to great high schools and great colleges and had these really incredible experiences, which when I reflect back at that time, probably people have heard about tiger moms, very like hard-hitting, strict parents who want their Asian kids to do really well and perform at really high levels and achieve. My parents were not at all like that.
Wow.
They were, like I said, they're total hippies.
That's fascinating. What was the secret sauce, do you think, for your family, and how you and your sisters have been so successful, both from an academic perspective and professionally?
It's funny because I was thinking about that. In the job that I have now, how did I get to where I am? And, a lot of it really boils down to, I think, my mom and actually how she raised me. And I was thinking of I should, write this down and think about all of these pearls of wisdom from my mom, or lessons my mom taught me. It's funny, she did give us a lot of freedom. So autonomy is one thing, to let us do what we want to do. I mean, she never really, being honest, she never asked about grades. My dad never asked about my grades.
Wow.
The only person ever asked about my grades was my uncle. That was the phone call. How are your grades? But my parents never did that. So I think they gave us the freedom to really do what we wanted to do and blossom in ways that, only we knew what we were going to do. So that was one thing. The other thing that, when I think about now kind of like, in sort of formal leadership didactics that I've done, it really does really boil down to what my mom has taught me, which is she would always value something that's different. Like you would go and find a pumpkin for Halloween, and she would always look for the one that had like the crooked stem or a dent, or you go to the grocery store and there's a dent in the tomato or something like that, or like a fused something or other. And it was always the weird one and the different one. And she always singled that out and said, that's the one. That's creativity. I don't know if she was just doing that because maybe it was the cheapest product there, but that's what she placed value in. And then, as I was, going through some tough things later in life, trying to, figure out different things, she would tell me if I ever had trouble, working with someone or trying to just organize something, she would say, well, really what everyone wants is just to be listened to. Mm-hmm. They just want someone to listen to them and pay attention to them. So regardless of what level you are in life or where you are along your professional career, if you're having trouble with an individual or a group of individuals, really just all they want is some attention. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was really powerful. And these like two little things, kind of you can apply it anywhere in life and it will kind of get you through.
Yeah, definitely.
I love something you said that your mother repetitively ingrained in you to some extent is to celebrate the differences. Mm-hmm. I think the nation is struggling right now celebrating differences. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what we're facing right now, both at in a community level and national level about celebrating the differences.
How long do we have?
It's a tough topic. It's very complex.
So, like I said, it's really interesting because I grew up, in middle America, family values, all of those things raised by Chinese American hippies, basically, and not the traditional Chinese culture at all that you would think back at that time, sort of in the 70s and 80s. And at the same time, growing up in middle America and being, a different race than most of the people around me, I personally didn't feel singled out. Obviously you sort of face certain things at certain times, but I do know that my mom and dad too, to some extent, like really kind of embraced that, like that part of, representing, Asians in the community and things like that. And my mom could definitely turn it on and turn it off. I could totally see that. But I think that we're at a really interesting time. The world is moving in really, really quickly. And I think that embracing differences is really important. But it's really interesting, and it crosses sort of all the lines of what I do in work, in medicine, and education. We really want to believe that everybody has a fair shot, but people really don't. And at some point, I think we have to sort of balance, assuming that everything is fair with how do we intentionally add diversity to areas where we have traditionally not had diversity, to encourage that diversity of thought, because I believe, and I think many people recognize now, that diversity of thought and I've heard this, the team of rivals from Lincoln, that we all have a collective intelligence that's greater than any individual. Like I said, it's a very traditional like leadership principle that we're learning about now, but it's actually what my mom said.
That's awesome. Because, when you think about it, groupthink is very dangerous. Mm-hmm. If everybody's saying it, then it must be the right thing. Well, not if there's a cliff there and everybody's just keeps walking off the cliff. So.
But do you see, like, there's a very fine line between groupthink and collective intelligence, right? So that's the line that we're trying to figure out.
Exactly.
And it's a fascinating discussion, I think.
Wow.
Wow, that's powerful. I love knowing kind of your thoughts on that and what you've seen as your experience. And it's really interesting too, because in a lot of ways you're very different in your field as a female even. And how has that experience kind of been? You know, you're the chair of the Department of Surgery, the very first at Loma Linda, and you've really come up in this kind of boys club. How has that been, and how have you kind of played upon what makes you unique in this field you're in today?
Well, first of all, it's such a huge honor to be the chair of surgery at Loma Linda. And it is, something that I actually never, strive to be. It wasn't on my to-do list in life. But as we had talked about, things happen and you find yourself in places that maybe you weren't expecting, but seem to be the right fit for at the right time. In that sense, there's plenty of things that I want to do with the Department of Surgery. But in terms of, this position now, I absolutely recognize the weight of my position, that I represent a very, very small fraction of women in medicine and an even smaller fraction of Asians in medicine. Right now, statistically, we know that more than 50% of entering students in medical school are women. But as you go up the leadership pipeline, that number, that proportion gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Right now, there are, I think, 23 or 25 women chairs of surgery departments in academic medicine. So it represents about 6 to 7% of all the chairs in surgery are women. It's, a very big responsibility, I think, for me to represent what it means that women in surgery can actually achieve. But I can say in these last few weeks that I've been walking around campus, I can see, people look at me a little bit differently, but in particular, a lot of the women students or women trainees are like, their eyes are open. They're like, wow, this is kind of cool,
Incredible.
So,
I love it that you're inspiring them. That's really cool. The next generation.
with regards to Asians in the medical field, I think that's, again, a really sensitive topic. There's a lot of Asians in healthcare. And I think if you compare statistics for Asians in the population versus Asians in medicine, Asians in medicine are definitely overrepresented. There are a large proportion of Asians that are in the medical field. But again, as you go up the leadership pipeline, that becomes more and more rare.
Mm-hmm.
So for chairs of surgery, actually only 1% are Asian descent, which is even smaller fraction than women. So again, I feel the weight of this position and what I represent. Again, it's such an honor, but really a huge responsibility. And it's something that I want to do well, not just for our department of surgery at Loma Linda, but to represent the people that come after me and see what possibilities lie ahead for them. And I do feel like when trainees, younger people in the field see me in this position, then it does open doors for them or open the possibilities so that they don't feel like there's actually barriers to achieving it.
Well, your chairwomanship is certainly based on merit. You've been a professor of surgery. You are a fantastic surgeon. You're a breast surgeon. Mm-hmm. For some people who may not be super familiar with what a breast surgeon does, talk a little bit about what your career is like.
Mm-hmm. I love my job, or my old job. I love the job of being a breast surgeon, and I have to, for the audience, actually, what I do, it's not the stuff that you think. It's not implants or augmentation or breast reduction. It's not that kind of fancy stuff that cosmetic surgery. It's actually more breast cancer surgery. So sometimes I'll say I'm a breast cancer surgeon, but I take care of women with breast diseases or breast problems most of which fortunately don't need surgery. But certainly women with breast cancer and other surgical breast problems, I take care of that. I, again, didn't set out to become a breast surgeon. And actually, when I was in training, this job didn't really exist. People who had surgical breast problems would actually see a general surgeon. But when I finished my residency training, my husband, who was also a surgeon, took 2 years to do a vascular surgery fellowship. And while he was in his fellowship, I was doing general surgery in a practice that was based in a women's health clinic. And so by that nature, doing general surgery in a women's health clinic where the patients are predominantly women, and I saw a lot of patients with breast disease and fell in love with it. That was before I moved to Loma Linda. And then when my husband and I were looking for jobs together in Loma Linda, I limited my practice to breast surgery at that time. And the person that hired me, Dr. Garboglio, who is the former chair of surgery, really took a risk at that time because this field did not exist and people thought it was crazy. How could you hire a surgeon who only does breast surgery? This was 20 years ago.
Wow.
But now it's actually its own specialty. So to get to where I am now, someone would actually have to do a breast surgery fellowship, do very specialized training in breast surgery, which also includes learning about all of the breast cancer medications and treatments and things like that, and some of the plastic surgery techniques as well. But I kind of learned it on the go. I tell people I was grandfathered or grandmothered into the field because it didn't exist at that time.
Wow. I mean, dealing with cancer patients and dealing with, delivering that diagnosis and talking them through this whole process of their journey, that's got to be incredibly difficult. What specifically made you choose cancer? What was the impetus there?
It's interesting because when I deliver that news to patients, what I have always been amazed by my entire career is that women take that information completely differently. And there are some women that will say, okay, great. I know it's cancer, but let's just do what we need to do. Very matter of fact, let's just get the job done. And then there are some women that once we say the diagnosis, they cannot hear anything else that I have to say. There's nothing else. They only hear cancer and then everything stops. Their entire life stops. Most people are somewhere in the in-between. And I have to gauge that with that news, kind of how much is she going to hear me say or understand. It's always really, really helpful if there's someone there with her. And we've had the unfortunate experience, this past year when women had to come in alone. And that was just horrible. But the way that I try to do it is to, first of all, be completely honest. There's no way that you can walk around that diagnosis. There's no way that you can sort of sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's just a little cancer. It's just a little bit of cancer or anything like that. I found over the years that I have always been very honest with my patients, that this is what it is. And this is, what we normally do to take care of you, always asking for questions. And then, actually really what is the great thing about what I do is that because there are so many different treatments for breast cancer nowadays, the woman actually has as much choice in it as, the doctor making the recommendations. And so there's this whole thing that we call shared decision-making. But really what it is just allowing the woman the ability to choose what she wants for her body. One small example of that, for instance, is, in my line of work in breast surgery, for women who have cancer, there's basically 2 ways you can remove a cancer from a woman's breast. The old-fashioned way is to remove the whole entire breast with a mastectomy, and more recently, which is like 50 years, is just to remove the cancerous portion with a lumpectomy or partial mastectomy. And when you look at how women do with either one, it's really equivalent. You don't live longer with one over the other. So it means that the woman gets to choose And I think allowing her that choice is a really important part of that process.
In my line of work, I've had the great honor of getting to interview a lot of your patients and really talk about that journey with them. And one of the things they've always said is how amazing you were at really taking the time to go over all those different options and really have that shared decision making. But then also the way that our cancer center offers kind of that whole person care. How do you think that that translates into some of the outcomes we see?
It's really a privilege to work with the colleagues that I have, because it's not just a surgeon taking care of a breast cancer patient. It's an oncologist, radiation doctor, plastic surgeons, nutritionist, a psychologist, nurse practitioner. There's so many people on this team. I've always felt that we've tried to do a very good job of looking at the patient in, 360 degrees. It's not just, okay, you've got a cancer, we're going to take care of your cancer, and then you're gone. We're going to give you the best treatments, and then you're gone. It's really taking time to listen to what the patient's needs are, and my colleagues are just amazing. So, I can have a challenging conversation, but then I know that my medical oncology colleagues will have another conversation with that patient, and the patient will get through.
Certainly the field has changed and there's more to offer, right? But still, those are heavy conversations. And so one of the things I'd like to hear from you is a long day, hard day. What do you do? What does Sharon Lum do to recharge her batteries to get up the next morning and do it all over again?
Well, first of all, I have to say those really, really tough discussions with my patients actually are, in and of themselves, they're really inspiring for me. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is that I know that when I tell a woman that she has breast cancer, I'm telling her something that's going to change her life and her family's life. And I know that it's crushing and it's really, really hard. But because I've done it for so long, I can see the other side of it. And I know that the vast, vast, vast majority of women with breast cancer actually do very, very well in the long run. And there's so many different treatments. There's so many new ways of taking care of our patients and their disease with breast cancer, that I know overall they're going to do well. They don't know that then, but I know a year from now things are going to be quite different, and we're going to get there. But to recharge, I have, actually it's interesting because my husband, who's also a surgeon, we've gone through this together, it's just so neat. We've been able to essentially work in the same hospital our whole entire careers. Who gets to do that? Yeah. So he has always been a huge supporter of whatever crazy thing that I am doing, like trying to be chair of surgery, that kind of thing. But we've had 20 years of raising our family. We have 3 kids. We raised them, they grew up, and they just all kind of moved out. So we are on, we were supposed to be on, I think, our second year of being empty nesters, even though it got shortened, like they moved back for a few months. But,
the COVID delay.
Yeah. But that's been fun. We are both runners, but I would say we don't run together because he's so much faster than me. So we have in the past trained for marathons together. Wow. Even though it's not really together. It's like we aim for the same race, but he's doing something else and I'm just plodding along here.
That is so cool that you've been able to go through that experience really together, and you guys even match together, which is was very rare, right? That's not a normal thing.
Well, for people who don't know what a match is.
That's true. We should define that.
Right. So that is. So a match, after you go to college and then you decide to become a doctor, you go to medical school for 4 years. And at the end of the 4 years, when you're supposed to have decided what specialty you want to do, you apply to residency programs in your field that you want to do, your specialty. And there's a special time, it's called match day, where you open an envelope and you find out where you're going to do your residency training to become the specialist that you want to be. And so my husband and I both decided that we wanted to do surgery. So from medical school, we had to apply to surgical residencies. This was back in the early 90s. Nobody applies for 2 surgery positions in the same program. Well, at least at that time, nobody did. It was not very common, first of all, because there weren't that many women in surgery, but also because if you hire a married couple in surgery residency, at that time, there were some surgery residency programs that literally bragged about their greater than 100% divorce rate.
Oh, no.
So it was a huge risk for a program to say, oh, let's hire a married couple in our program because they might end up getting divorced, and that would not be a good thing. But we were very fortunate, and we did the couples match, and we actually were taken into the program at OHSU, which, by the way, had a married couple in the program. So, so we actually had great mentorship and had a great, starting point to our marriage.
I would like to switch gears just a little bit and give you a platform to tell men and women listening to this podcast what we need to do to prevent or detect breast cancer early on from a population health perspective.
That's a great question. And I have to say, coming off of the pandemic, one thing that we did see was that people just did not come in for their screening mammograms. And rightly so, because very early on, with the stay-at-home orders, our radiology department even, took a break. They shut down because we didn't know at the time what was safe to do. And because of all of that, I think that there was a lot of fear for people just coming in to get their just regular checkups, the routine care, their kids' vaccinations and things like that. And so we just saw, over the, really since March of last year, screening mammograms just plummeted. And we've actually researched this. We're submitting papers on this and things like that. And what we really worry about is that, obviously when the reason that we recommend that women get screening mammograms is that by doing a screening mammogram, if you get breast cancer, we can detect it at a very early, highly treatable, highly curable stage. And that's why we recommend people get their screening mammograms. But in this whole entire year of people just not being able to access a system or not coming in to get their screening mammograms because they're afraid of catching COVID, we're really worried that a few years from now, we might see women coming in with more advanced cancers. Wow. And that's a really, really scary thought. Mm-hmm. So if I had one word of advice for the listeners, please get your cancer screenings done. Whether, if you're a woman, get your mammograms done. Regardless, get your colon cancer screening done, get your cervical cancer screening done. It's very, very safe. At least at Loma Linda in the Women's Imaging Center, I had my mammogram during the pandemic and completely clean. It's cleaner, it's cleaner now than it's ever been. Not that it wasn't before, but the process to maintain patient safety is impeccable. So I do encourage everyone to catch up on their cancer screenings. For women, it's their mammograms. For everybody, get their colon cancer screening done. I mean, I'm sure you have some, screening recommendations as well. From a population health standpoint, I mean, in terms of what we can do once you get past, what can we do for screening, something that we have really completely ignored for breast health and prevention of breast cancer for decades and generations and way, way too long is actually basically taking care of your body and your health like you should be. What we know now is that short of, say, being a woman and getting older, which are the two major risk factors for getting breast cancer, which you can't do anything about that, right? The one biggest issue that is impacting us now is that obesity is a risk factor, and that women who are obese actually don't do as well from their breast cancer treatments as women who are normal weight. Wow. And so all of the things that we should be doing anyway with our lives, like exercising, eating a healthy diet, eating plant-based proteins, avoiding alcohol, avoiding red meat, those things are good for us in general, but they also help prevent breast cancer. And those are totally within our control. But we as physicians and in the healthcare community, we've never messaged that. And we've never really paid attention to that. We pay attention to the fancy drugs, but we don't pay attention to these basic fundamental things of living a healthy lifestyle that are going to do way more for us than a super expensive drug.
Yeah.
So if there's one thing we want to arm our loved ones with, it's screening and it's healthy lifestyle.
Exactly.
There is one last question I want to ask you this evening. You had mentioned getting your breast cancer screening and your colon cancer screening. I'm a simple cardiologist, but I do remember at some point in time that there's a relationship between those two cancers in some families.
There are relationships with different groups of cancers, and I think that what you're
Ovarian
alluding to is cancer family syndromes, where there are cancer genes that can be passed on from a parent to a child that increases the chances of getting certain types of cancer. So, for instance, I think one that people have heard of are the BRCA genes, the BRCA genes, and in families who have the BRCA genes, they have a high chance of getting breast cancer and ovarian cancer, prostate cancer in men. We're learning a lot more, but this is the actual cancer gene that Angelina Jolie had, and actually did a great public service by talking about it and letting people know about it. But those cancer genes, first of all, are very rare. But when I find a patient or families who have this pattern where there's a whole bunch of cancers in the family, we can do a very simple test, which is a genetic test, to find out if they actually carry one of those genes that predisposes them to cancer or different types of cancer. And I think in the past, people have always been really afraid of it, because why would I want to know that? It's not going to change anything. I don't want to be burdened with the worry. But although it sounds really cliched, knowledge is truly power. Mm-hmm. And when you find out that you have one of these, there are things that you can do. There are steps that you can take to protect yourself, to protect your family members, to prevent yourself from getting cancer. If we find someone who might have one of these, we always try to identify it so that we can actually do something about it. Yeah. And as a surgeon, there's very few things that I can do to actually prevent someone from getting cancer, except for this. So I really feel very strongly about it. On a personal level, my dad has one of these breast cancer genes, and it runs on his side of the family. Every woman on his side of the family had breast cancer or ovarian cancer, one of these things. Wow. And, I finally got him in to get the genetic testing done, and he actually does have one of the cancer genes. Fortunately, I don't, but I went through this whole entire process with my entire family of, trying to figure out what to do. So on a very personal level, I feel very, very strongly about that it really is very powerful information that you can use to protect your loved ones.
Yeah, it's incredible that you have that personal connection and you're in this field and you're making a difference. And I feel like one of the threads I've kind of heard from you tonight is your hope. You have, it seems like, an awful lot of hope that things are so dramatically different and we're changing in such a positive direction in terms of being able to arm ourselves with more power. It sounds like you're probably excited for the next, 5 years and what's going to happen then in the next 5 years and the new research that you're even bringing to the field with your work.
I am. I'm really excited about it. And in my new position as chair of surgery, it's just super, super exciting for me to look ahead. First of all, everybody is really excited about moving into the new hospital. That the campus transformation, everyone just can't wait. It can't happen fast enough. And we've watched the building go up, and everybody is just super excited. 20 brand new ORs, 2 hybrid rooms, and those are super fancy, like the most advanced technology that you can have. So our surgeons are just, they can't wait. It's like, getting to the starting line and go. But that aside, that's going to be really amazing. Our faculty are just, I'm so proud of our department and the talent, and particularly the young talent. Our young faculty members that have joined us recently, it's just an incredibly intelligent and highly skilled group. They're doing cutting edge research, but the really one thing that brings everyone to Loma Linda is the emphasis on whole person care. So I think that we really do have a very special department of surgery that, our guys are great technicians. They're doing fantastic research. We're educating the students. We're taking care of this really important community. But at the same time, we are here because we actually do believe in the mission of whole person care. And it's this extra, whatever, I don't know what you call it, but something that you look beyond just the physicality of the individual, their spiritual health, their mental health, their nutritional health, their psychological health. Everything is kind of rolled into that package. And I think, people have asked me why I've been here for so long. I've been here for over 20 years now. My husband's been here over 20 years now. It's really because of this emphasis on more than just, getting the operation done.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming this evening. I'm certainly inspired. Sometimes I need a refresher too, and I feel like you've given me that. I can't thank you enough for what you do for the organization, what you do for our patients, and the leader that you are within the Department of Surgery and in the organization as a whole. So thank you again for coming, and I hope that this airs at Sundance next year.
Here's hoping.
Thank you so much.